The Whispers of Oakhaven, The Mystery of a Haunted Village and Forgotten Truth. Dr. Aris Thorne, a passionate archaeologist, follows the trail of Oakhaven, a village wiped out mysteriously by the Great Blight of 1789. But as he and his team delve into the barren land, they uncover a terrifying truth. Not disease, but a failed exorcism ritual consumed the village, trapping its souls in eternal torment. Amidst cold ruins and whispering ghosts, Aris faces a haunting burden to help free the trapped spirits before he too is consumed by the shadows of Oakhaven. Art 1. The Lost Village. Dr. Aris Thorne was a man consumed by the forgotten. His office, in the university archives, was less a room and more the tomb of lost knowledge, perpetually shrouded in the fine, ethereal dust of centuries-old paper. Sunlight, when it deigned to pierce the grime of the high windows, merely illuminated the tireless dance of motes, a silent testament to the passage of time. For weeks, perhaps months, Aris had been a ghost himself, haunting the labyrinthine stacks, his sharp, intelligent eyes scanning brittle ledger entries, faded cartographies, and obscure parish records. His current obsession was Oakhaven, a name that whispered through the hushed halls of historical anomaly. Official accounts, sparse and suspiciously vague, claimed the entire village had been eradicated by the Great Blight of 1789, a particularly virulent epidemic that left no survivors. Yet, the complete absence of any mass graves, any definitive burial records, or even a consistent mention in contemporary regional histories, gnawed at Aris. Villages, even those devastated by plague, rarely vanished without a trace, leaving behind such a profound, unsettling silence in the historical record. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, as the late autumn light began to wane, a triumph, his fingers, stained with ink and dust, smoothed over a thin, rolled parchment, its edges crumbling like ancient pastry. The coordinates, painstakingly cross-referenced from fragmented surveyor's notes and a cryptic diary entry, finally aligned. A rare, almost boyish smile touched his lips as Professor Alara Vance, his esteemed colleague and longtime mentor, entered his office, a knowing glint in her eye. "Aris, you found it. I knew you would," she announced, her voice a low, steady current in the academic quiet. He confirmed, his voice imbued with a quiet excitement, that this was indeed the last known location of Oakhaven, the elusive ghost village. Professor Vance reiterated the historical narrative. 100 souls vanished, no survivors, no trace, which only fueled Aris's intellectual hunger. This wasn't just a historical footnote. It was a gaping void, a narrative black hole demanding to be filled. The university, swayed by the sheer enigma of it all, had greenlit a full expedition, with Aris at its helm. He unrolled the crude, hand-drawn map, detailing a secluded valley nestled deep within an ancient, unnamed forest, a place seemingly forgotten by time itself. Weeks later, the sterile quiet of the archives was replaced by the damp, earthy scent of decay and dense foliage. Aris, now clad in practical outdoor gear, led his two young, eager assistants, Lila and Mark, through the oppressive, almost primeval woods. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The usual symphony of birdsong was conspicuously absent, replaced by an unnerving, profound silence that pressed in on them. Finally, they broke through the last thicket, emerging into a clearing. Before them lay Oakhaven, not as a bustling village, but as a skeletal memory. Moss-covered stone foundations, barely discernible beneath centuries of overgrowth, outlined what were once homes, a communal well, and the ghostly silhouette of a small church. "It's quiet, eerily quiet," Lila whispered, her voice barely disturbing the stillness. Mark, ever the pragmatist, offered a dismissive shrug, but even he seemed affected by the oppressive atmosphere. Aris walked slowly, his gaze sweeping over the ruins, a strange, internal chill settling over him, despite the mild afternoon sun. He ran his hand over a particularly large, flat stone. It felt unnaturally cold, as if radiating an ancient sorrow. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to drift through the trees, carried on a breeze that simply wasn't there. Aris shook his head, attributing it to the exhaustion of the journey, but the unsettling sensation lingered, a subtle discord in the profound silence of Oakhaven. Part 2. The Unraveling Narrative. Weeks blurred into a rhythm of methodical excavation, the initial thrill of discovery slowly giving way to a growing, pervasive sense of unease that settled over the Oakhaven site like a persistent, cold mist. Tents were pitched, trenches meticulously dug, and every shard of pottery, every rusted tool, every fragment of bone was carefully catalogued. Yet the answers they sought remained elusive, replaced instead by a deepening enigma. Dr. Aris Thorne, usually invigorated by the dusty work of unearthing history, found himself increasingly troubled. He was hunched over a newly exposed section of what appeared to be the village common, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is odd, very odd," he murmured, more to himself than to his team. Lila, meticulously brushing dirt from a ceramic shard nearby, looked up, her youthful eagerness beginning to fray at the edges. "What is it, Dr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice hushed, as if afraid to disturb the oppressive quiet. Aris gestured to the exposed earth. "The soil composition here, it's inconsistent with natural decay. And look at these foundation stones." He pointed to dark, almost vitrified patches on the ancient stone, areas that seemed less weathered and more burned. "These aren't just weathering," he explained, his voice low with dawning realization. "These are signs of intense heat, unnaturally intense." Before Lila could respond, Mark's voice, sharp with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, cut through the stillness from near the crumbling church ruins. "Dr. Thorne, you need to see this." Aris and Lila hurried over, their boots crunching on loose gravel. Mark had uncovered a section of the church's interior wall, and what they saw made the blood run cold. It was heavily scorched, far beyond what simple fire damage would suggest, almost as if the very stone had wept black tears. And embedded in the charred plaster, almost fused with it, were unmistakable fragments of human bone. Lila gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "But the blight, epidemics don't cause fires like this." The words hung in the air, a stark contradiction to the historical narrative. Aris's mind raced, connecting the vitrified stones, The scorched wall, the bone fragments. No, they don't, he agreed, his voice a grim whisper. And where are the mass graves? If 100 people died of disease, there would be a communal burial site. We haven't found a single one. The logical inconsistencies piled up, each piece of evidence chipping away at the comforting lie of a natural disaster. That night the wind picked up, rattling the canvas of Aris's tent like a nervous drum. Inside, he worked under the harsh beam of a portable lamp, meticulously examining the bone fragments under his microscope. The cellular structure, even after centuries, screamed of rapid, extreme thermal shock. These people hadn't succumbed to a slow, wasting sickness. They had been consumed by fire. A sudden, sharp crack, like a dry branch snapping under immense pressure, echoed from outside, making Aris jump. He grabbed his flashlight, heart pounding, and peered out of the tent flap. Nothing. The air was still, the trees unmoving. Yet the chilling whisper from their first night returned, stronger now, almost a collective sigh that seemed to rise from the very earth beneath his feet. It was no longer a trick of fatigue. It was a presence, a lingering memory of agony, and it was watching them. Part 3, The Ritual's Echoes. The days that followed the discovery of the charred bones in the church wall were marked by a grim, almost desperate intensity. The team continued to dig, but their initial academic enthusiasm had been replaced by a growing sense of dread, a chilling certainty that they were unearthing not just history, but a profound, lingering tragedy. Every swing of the pickaxe, every brushstroke revealing another layer of soil, seemed to bring forth more unsettling evidence, not just bones, but fragments of tools, pottery, even scraps of what might have been clothing. All bore the unmistakable, telltale signs of intense, sudden incineration, a flimsy veil over a far more terrifying truth. And he was inexorably drawn into its unraveling. His relentless pursuit of answers led him back to the church ruins, the epicenter of the most disturbing discoveries. It was there, beneath the crumbling remains of what would have been the altar, that his trowel struck something hard, metallic. With painstaking care, he excavated around it, revealing a small, lead-lined box, remarkably preserved by its protective casing. A shiver ran down his spine as he lifted it, the weight of it feeling strangely significant. He carefully unlatched the corroded clasp and opened the lid. Inside, nestled amongst dried, brittle herbs and what looked like desiccated animal parts, was a collection of crude, hand-carved wooden effigies. Each one was grotesque, twisted into contorted shapes, with wide, screaming mouths that seemed to echo the silent torment of the village. And chillingly, each was partially charred, as if they too had been subjected to the same searing heat that had consumed the villagers. Lila, peering over his shoulder, pointed a trembling finger at strange symbols carved into the inside lid of the box. These symbols, they're not common religious iconography, she whispered, her voice tight with unease. They look like wards or bindings. Aris's heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm in his chest. He recognized the recurring pattern, obscure, ancient, but unmistakable. These are exorcism symbols, he stated, his voice barely audible. Ancient, obscure, but unmistakable. They were trying to cast something out. He looked from the effigies to the charred remains of the church, then back to the scattered, burnt fragments they had unearthed. The horrifying truth. A revelation far more dreadful than any epidemic, clicked into place with sickening clarity. They weren't dying from the blight, he articulated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. They were trying to exorcise it, and it went catastrophically wrong. The fire, it wasn't an accident. It was the ritual itself, or its terrible consequence. As the chilling realization settled, a sudden violent gust of wind whipped through the clearing, despite the calm, cloudless sky. The air grew heavy, thick with a profound cold that seeped into their bones. A faint, acrid smell, like burnt flesh and ozone, filled Aris's nostrils, making him gag. He spun around, his eyes darting frantically, but saw nothing. Yet, at the edge of his vision, near the skeletal remains of the church, a faint, translucent shimmer appeared, a fleeting distortion in the air, gone as quickly as it had manifested. The spirits of Oakhaven, disturbed by the unveiling of their horrific truth, were no longer content to merely whisper. They were beginning to show themselves. Part 4. Confrontation and Connection. Sleep was a distant, mocking concept for Aris Thorne that night. The canvas walls of his tent offered no solace, no barrier against the oppressive weight of Oakhaven's true history. The crude, charred effigies he had unearthed lay on his makeshift table, their grotesque, screaming faces seeming to stare back at him, silent witnesses to a horror he was only just beginning to comprehend. Every shadow cast by his portable lamp seemed to writhe with unseen torment, and the air, though still, felt thick with the acrid scent of burnt offerings and ozone, a phantom echo of the ritual fire. His mind replayed the horrifying sequence. The blight as a cover, the intense heat, the fused bones, the exorcism symbols. It was a tapestry woven from desperation and unimaginable suffering. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the villagers had not simply died. They had been consumed, their final moments filled with terror and the agonizing failure of their desperate attempt at salvation. Amidst the archaeological finds, tucked into a miraculously preserved clay pot near the church's crumbling altar, Aris had discovered a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages, though brittle with age, had somehow escaped the inferno. The handwriting was shaky, frantic, almost illegible in places, but the name, inscribed on the inside cover, sent a jolt through him. Ilara, not his colleague, Professor Ilara Vance, but the Ilara, a village elder and healer, as mentioned in the scant historical fragments he'd found. This was a first-hand account, a voice from the very heart of the catastrophe. He began to read aloud, his voice a low, reverent murmur in the tense, suffocating quiet, giving breath to the long-dead words. "The sickness, it is not of the flesh," he read, the elder's terror palpable even across centuries. "It is in their minds, their very souls. They scream of shadows, of whispers that drive them to madness. The blight is a lie. This is a possession. We must perform the cleansing. The old ways. It is our only hope." Each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of the official narrative, confirming his darkest suspicions. He flipped a few more pages, the desperation in the elder's script growing with each line. The final entries were almost indecipherable, scrawled with a frantic urgency. "The fire, it burns the vessel, but the spirit, it lingers. We failed. Oh God, we failed. Their screams, they echo in the smoke. They're still here, waiting, for someone to remember, for someone to touch them. As the last word left his lips, a profound cold, sharp and immediate, enveloped him. A cold hand, impossibly cold, brushed his arm. Aris froze, every muscle tensing, his breath catching in his throat. He slowly, agonizingly, turned his head. Standing directly behind him, translucent and shimmering, was the faint, ethereal outline of a woman. Her face, though indistinct, held an expression of profound terror. Her mouth open in a silent, eternal scream. It was Alara, the village elder, as she must have appeared in her youth, trapped in her final, horrifying moment. Her spectral hand, the one that had brushed his arm, reached out, wavering, towards the journal on the table. Surprisingly, Aris did not scream. Fear in that moment was overshadowed by a profound sadness, a deep, aching empathy. He felt an overwhelming sorrow radiating from her, a desperate plea. "You were trying to help them, weren't you?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You tried to save them." The spectral woman nodded, a barely perceptible movement that caused her translucent form to waver like smoke. Then, the tent was no longer empty. A cacophony of silent screams erupted around them, a chorus of unheard agony. More forms appeared, swirling around Alara, indistinct, tormented, their faces contorted in agony, their hands reaching, pleading. They were the villagers, 100 souls trapped in a perpetual nightmare, their torment radiating outwards, filling the tent with a suffocating grief that was not his own. Yet he felt it acutely. He realized with a chilling certainty that they were not hostile. They were trapped, and they were waiting. Part 5. The unveiling and lingering horror. Dawn broke over Oakhaven, but it brought no warmth, no solace. The rising sun, usually a symbol of new beginnings, merely cast long, eerie shadows across the skeletal ruins, making the charred remains of the church and the ghostly outlines of foundations seem even more desolate. Aris Thorne stood in the center of the village common, the leather-bound journal clutched in his hand, its ancient pages now a testament to a horrifying truth. Leela and Mark stood a few paces away, their faces pale and drawn, their expressions a mix of fear and profound bewilderment. They hadn't seen the spectral forms that had filled Aris's tent, but they had felt the oppressive atmosphere, the sudden inexplicable drops in temperature, and the unsettling whispers that now seemed to be a constant hum beneath the surface of the village's unnatural silence. The academic expedition had become something far more profound, far more terrifying than any of them had anticipated. Aris took a deep breath, the cold air burning in his lungs, and began to speak, his voice low but clear, carrying the weight of centuries of unspoken agony. The Great Blight was a cover story, he stated, his gaze sweeping over the ruins, as if addressing the very ground beneath their feet. The villagers weren't dying of disease. They were being driven mad by something unseen, a malevolent entity. He gestured towards the scorched remains of the church, its stone bones still radiating a phantom heat. They performed an exorcism, a fire ritual meant to cleanse the village, to burn out the evil. But the entity, it wasn't cast out, it clung to them, and when the flames consumed their bodies, their souls were trapped with it. bound to this place, unable to move on. The words hung in the air, a chilling epitaph to a forgotten tragedy. Lila gasped, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "So, they're ghosts?" she whispered, the word feeling inadequate for the profound suffering they had uncovered. Aris looked at the spectral woman, Alara, who now stood silently beside him, a translucent sentinel, her silent plea echoing in his mind. Around her, the other villagers swirled, indistinct forms of torment, their unheard screams and desperate gestures growing more frantic as their story was finally spoken aloud. "Not just ghosts," Aris clarified, his voice laced with a deep empathetic sorrow. "They are the lingering echoes of a ritual gone horribly wrong. Their torment is perpetual. They are waiting for someone to understand their plight, to touch them." A profound sense of responsibility settled upon him. He had come seeking historical facts, but he had found something far more immediate and agonizing, a collective, unending suffering. Slowly, deliberately, he expended his hand towards the spectral woman. His fingers passed through her form, a sensation like plunging into ice. But then he felt it, a profound cold, a deep aching sorrow that was not his own. And then, a faint, almost electrical current, a spark of connection that was undeniably real. The spectral woman's eyes, previously wide with eternal terror, now held a flicker of something new, recognition, a glimmer of hope, fragile but present. Mark, still reeling from the revelation, finally found his voice. "What do we do, Dr. Thorne? Can we help them?" Aris looked around at the swirling, tormented forms of Oakhaven's lost souls, their silent pleas, now a deafening roar in his mind. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could not simply leave. He had touched them, and in doing so, their burden had, in a way, become his own. He looked back at the spectral Alara. Her translucent lips moved, forming a silent word, a desperate command that resonated deep within his soul. Remember. The sun climbed higher, casting its golden light over the ruins, but the profound chill in Oakhaven remained. The whispers didn't fade. They lingered, a constant, mournful hum, a chilling reminder of the souls trapped within its charred remains, waiting for someone to truly listen, to truly touch them. And Aris, the archaeologist who had come to find a lost village, had found something far more terrifying, a responsibility to the dead, a haunting legacy he was now bound to carry.